Okay, thank you all for coming. I'm not going to spend a lot of time introducing Ron again because you know who he is, and you heard him and you know how impressive he is. So we're going to go right into the questions. My name is Jon Allen. I'm the policy advisor to JSpace. I'm on the NIFTY advisory board, and I chair something called Meretz Canada, which tries to bring Palestinians and Israelis together through power.
Someone's just no one is good. There you are.
Okay, so we're going to start. Hello, yeah, good. We're going to start now. So let's start, Ron, with the most recent polling from aChord from last month. And we're going to start with a question regarding the expansion of the Abraham Accords. You all know what the Abraham Accords are. Just to remind you that one of the elements that was missing in the Abraham Accords, of course, was the Palestinian question. Some have argued that because it wasn't part of the Palestinian question wasn't there, that contributed to Hamas's activity. Your question in your poll asked the Israeli public if they're for or against expanding the Abraham Accords and normalizing relations with Saudi Arabia. 59% were for it. Yet when you look at only those who had a real opinion on the matter, 92% were for it. 92% of Israelis who had an opinion were in favor of this Saudi deal or integration into the region. On the other hand, the New Israel Fund recently did a poll along with JSpace and Canadian Friends of Peace Now. Now, they worded their question somewhat differently. And they asked about the ideal political outcome for Israel and Palestine. And interestingly, only 51% of Canadians voted in favor of a two-state solution in response to that poll post-October 7th.
Excuse me, are those Canadian Jews?
Yes.
Canadian Jews?
Jews. That's who they interviewed, polled exactly. So can you unpack for us in any direction you want, why do you think it is that Israelis are perhaps more willing to take a risk towards two states and normalization than Canadian Jews?
Okay, so first I'm happy to have an opportunity to go into length in discussion of the issue. And I think maybe I'll give a few minutes background on where is the Israeli public now vis-a-vis the conflict, and then I'll relate directly to the open. In aChord, on a constant basis, we are doing research and studies in order to understand where the Israeli public is, and the most important, to build on this research in order to develop messages to an intervention that can change public opinion in Israel, which is this is what we want to do. Okay, we are not only a research organization. So the thing that stands in the background of the thing that drive mostly the Israeli Jewish public. Now, when I will speak about the Israeli public, I will speak mainly about the Israeli Jewish public, which is 80% of the citizens. The number 1, 2, 3, 4, 10 that Israelis care about in these days is security. Security. This is what people, this is what drives people, this is what they care of. And of course, it makes sense for October 7th, it would be a big surprise if it wasn't the case. unfortunately, when you speak about now human rights for or human rights, or human rights for the Palestinian, for the majority of Israelis, it's not an issue at all. Even if they care about human rights for the Palestinian, okay, this is not what drives them. People want to see. And what we see following October 7th, and we begin to see it in our research around January, February 2024, is a kind of contradicting trend. Some things went very negatively, but at the same time the things went very negatively, there is also a pragmatic side in the Israeli public, and I'll now elaborate. So following October 7th, we see that Jewish Israelis have very negative emotion towards Palestinians. The level of aid against Palestinians is something that we have never seen before. Think about the Palestinians as an homogeneous group. All the Palestinians support Hamas, all the Palestinians support October 7th. I mean, it's not my statement, it's like what the Israeli public think that there will never be peace with the Palestinians. When you ask them directly, are you for a two-state solution? Of course, they will say no. Okay, they don't want to give gift for those that attack us in such cruel way on October 7th. And we even say, as I said before downstairs, a real sense of dehumanization of the Palestinian. Think about what I mentioned before. There is not innocent people in Gaza. I was fighting with people that were with me in the army unit, and they seriously, in our WhatsApp group said there is no Palestinians in Gaza. So I asked them what about the kids? No, the kids, they learn the parents. But what about the kids 6 months old? Is not innocent? And really, people, like, of course, not all Israelis, the majority of Israelis, including the liberal democratic center. Now, I would say those, of course, this is, of course, bad direction, but it is not a surprise for the October 7th. If it wasn't the case, it would have been a surprise. Following the massacre of October 7th, this is what happened to communities when they are attacked and suffer so much casualties. So in that sense, the Israeli Jewish public went more to the right, more to the hawkish, as expected following the October 7th massacre. But at the same time, there is also a sense of pragmatism inside the Jewish public, and the sense of pragmatism manifests itself in few ways. First, till October 7th, generally, okay, and kind of illustrate. The right wing was responsible for security, and the left was responsible for violence. And this collapsed in October 7th, because we had like the most right-wing government in the history of Israel, only right-wing, no moderate, no left, nothing, okay? And we got like the biggest murder of Jews since 1945. So this linkage between right-wing and security collapsed in October 7th. And the second thing that we began to see around March 2024, we've been asking in our survey, what do you think can ensure Israel's security? Is it military force, combination of military force and diplomatic agreement, or diplomatic agreement? And we see that more than 70% of Jewish Israelis think that Israel's security can be ensured. I mean, it's a very small number think that only diplomatic agreement, and I congratulate them for the optimism. But the big part say it is the combination of military force and diplomatic agreement. And when we speak about 70%, it means it goes deeper into the right wing. There are not 70% left and center of Israel. The number are much lower. And this is a critical point to understand, and it really takes us closely to what you have asked. And the third thing, which for us was the biggest surprise, we started to see that when we ask Jewish Israelis about what was then called the Biden plan, now it's called maybe the Saudi plan, which is, we phrase it as a security regional agreement backed by the USA, include normalization with the moderate Arab countries, include Saudi Arabia, and include the establishment of a Palestinian state. And we see that there was a level of 50% support among Israeli public for this statement, even though it included a Palestinian state. And again, you ask them, are you for Palestinian state? The answer will be no. If you ask them as a US, the answer will be yes. It is not manipulation. because the offer now on the ground is this Saudi plan, is this regional diplomatic agreement. And following Trump election, and I'm not going to say, I don't think any good thing about Trump, and for sure I would not say it here in this audience, but we saw that in the beginning, Trump was like for the hostages deal, and for the regional agreement. So the significant even increase. In February, we reached for the first time 60% of the citizens of Israel support this regional diplomatic plan, include the Palestinian state. Among them, 50% of the Jews in Israel, and almost a consensus among the democratic liberal camp. And a consensus among the liberal democratic camp. Something like between 70% to 80%. Yeah. Between 70 to 80% of the liberal democratic camp, which means those are the opposition to the current Israeli government, there is a support for this regional diplomatic agreement.
Let me just say that it's important to note that even though the Saudi plan or the integration plan talks about a pathway to peace with the Palestinians, the question was not about a pathway. Because if it had been a pathway, I could see Israelis saying, yeah, a pathway, we'll see what happens, and the Saudis, but the question was a Palestinian state. So that's, to my mind, significant. So
it is, thanks, John. I think it's a very important note. And our analysis of the reason for such a support, which again, it's a surprise, it is not what is expected. Usually, and we see it in other places in the world, when there was such a violent eruption, for the first good years, the sides want only to eliminate the other side, to kill everyone on the other side. And it takes a few years, and then people are looking for pragmatic solution. In Israel, maybe like everything it goes very, very fast. Those things happen together. And we think, John, from our analysis, and you ask, what can be explained a different perspective in the Jewish public in Israel, in the Canadian Jewish public. So from our perspective, the factor that drove the most is the desire for security. People think that people understood. For us in Israel, the fact that the Israeli army didn't succeed to protect the borders, it's like, we cannot understand it. Okay, they left 400 soldiers in the borders. It's something that we cannot understand. And the intelligence failed, everything failed. So people look for security, and when they hear about, international agreement in Saudi Arabia and the USA, and we should remember the two times that Iran attacked Israel, it was this coalition, okay, that protected Israel. This is probably what drives the support.
I can certainly understand where Israelis are coming from, but then the question is, why do only 50% of Jews in Canada support now a two-state solution, when pre-October 7th, I think that figure would have been higher. There would have been questions about it. There would have been concerns about the partner. There would have been, questions, but certainly support for the two-state solution prior to October 7th was higher. So do you have any sense about what's going on in North America, Canada, and the US about why we've become so polarized and why so many Jews now think that two states are no longer possible, where Israelis, at least intellectually, can move beyond that?
Well, it's an hard question for me. I'm not an expert on what's going on in the Jewish community in North America. If I look on that from the perspective of social psychology, the fact that we're on the ground, it is related to what I say about the natural process that happened in the Israeli society. The October 7th massacre was awful. And different people, including me, thought, that Hamas might have different faces. And for October 7th, of course, it was clear that Hamas is a terror organization, but maybe has some moderate function. We found that very different in October 7th. And I think that the cruel things that happened in October 7th and the cruel things that now happen related to the releasing of the hostages led people to believe there is no one in the other side to make peace with, or to make agreement with. I assume that this is what drives the public opinion in North America. I should say one more thing, that maybe I hope not. Netanyahu's biggest political project is to say the following, that there is nothing in the world like a moderate Palestinian. Like those two things cannot happen together. There is no moderate Palestinian. This is what Netanyahu said. The security service in Israel cooperates with the general security services. I'm sure that you know about it very well. With the Shin Bet, it's not a secret, okay? The Israeli Shin Bet and the Palestinian Shin Bet, they work together to avoid terror. And at the same time, the Prime Minister keeps on saying that Palestinian Authority is a terror organization, which is true. Okay? But maybe people believe in Netanyahu.
And at the same time, he was allowing funding by the Qataris of Hamas so that he could prove that there was no partner for peace. Let me just say that Princeton University, dean of the Princeton University School of International Public Affairs, was doing polling in Gaza just before October 7th. In fact, right up until October 6th. And what they found, and this goes to the dehumanization point, is that 26% of Gazans supported Hamas. 26%. Now, of that 26%, you have to realize that the government in Gaza was Hamas. So some people may have been a little reluctant to say they didn't support them. But when one hears, even from President Herzog, that all Gazans are Hamas, which he said on the third day, that contributes to that kind of dehumanization. It will take time before the shock and the trauma changes. Let's move on to something else, which is kind of disturbing in the other way. There also seems to be quite substantial support for Trump's transfer plan, forcing Palestinians out of Gaza. 50% of Israelis and 60% of Israelis with an opinion on the matter support this plan. So I guess the question is how, on the one hand, do a significant number of Israelis support the Saudi plan, let's call it, which includes two states, and at the same time, you've got what must be the same people in part saying we support what what international humanitarian law says, a combination of collective punishment and forcing people out of their homes, which is by another definition ethnic cleansing. So how do we reconcile the two?
So indeed, when we got those results in our research, we were looking at the result, we were trying to see that those are the real results, And indeed, it means that there are maybe 10-15% that support the both things. And my understanding is that, as I said before, people really want security, and the desire for security is at a level that they are ready, like for what they see like extreme things. So for some of them, establishment of the Palestinian or the Saudi deal that include the Palestinian state, this is something that would prefer not to go, but since they want security, they will support it, even though it is for them like very extreme to support the Palestinian state after October 7th. And for others, they are ready to go to the extreme solution of forcing the Palestinians to live, to do a transfer by force. And if you look at this option of transfer by force, so there are a few reasons that drive this support. One, as I've just said, the desire for security. Second is the really continuation rule of the Hamas in October 7th. And in the recent weeks, all this show against, in all the Shabbatot, the hostages were moved back on Shabbat. So everyone is seeing TV. And you should remember that when Eli Sharabi got from the hostages, he really looked like an Holocaust survivor. It was like, wow. What you saw in the network in Israel in the later hours, it was, you can't believe. People saying, we should kill them all, we should kill them all. It was like such a strong sense that, something that the way that it really looked like an Auschwitz survivor. You remember? So it came out of things. And that creates what I said before, a moral license. A moral license is that when you feel that something so bad was done to you, you're ready to get rid on all the moral obligation that usually you put on yourself as a person or as a country. The third reason is Trump. In Israel, unfortunately, is the Western country with the highest support for Trump. And Trump created normal. When Trump says, I know that for you it's very weird, and for me it's very difficult to understand there is such a majority in Israel that support Trump. Okay, maybe now less, but when he was elected, this was the figures. So it was what was so many Israelis went after it. And the fourth reason is the fact that the leadership in Israel of the extreme right-wing factors in the government normalize such ideas. Okay, when Rav Kahana was elected to the Knesset, Yitzhak Shamir was prime minister. Yitzhak Shamir was very hawkish. Okay, I think it was even considered extreme right-wing. And when Kahana went to speak in the Knesset, Yitzhak Shamir left the Knesset hall, and all the Likud party left the Knesset hall. Kahana was speaking in front of an empty Knesset. And the current leader of the Likud, Tayam, insert Ben Gvir to the government time after time again. Okay? It is the Ben Gvir in November 23 voted against the first hostages deal in which they brought babies. Do you remember it? They brought Jewish babies from Gaza in exchange for 3 Palestinian prisoners that were not even terrorists. They were like thefts of cars or something. And Ben Gvir voted against. This is the level of extremism. And Smotrich, who is the finance minister, he said we should do ashmada mukhlet. Ashmada is like annihilation. Annihilation. Total annihilation for communities in Gaza. And this is the finance minister of Israel. And that's great norms. If the finance minister said that we should do total annihilation, so why would young people will not be it for transfer? Transfer is not like killing people, it's even. And that's a very bad process.
It's a very dangerous process. I don't want to leave you depressed, so I'm going to try to answer some slightly more optimistic question. Can you just one more thing, please?
I want to say that the thing with the transfer, first, it's really a central issue, people support it. And it will never happen. So it's like supporting nothing that will never happen. So it's just, delaying the solution that should be taken. But there is another thing, that once the transfer becomes like a legitimate idea. So it means that one of the solutions of the conflict is that one of the nations will not stay in Israel-Palestine. And you shall know better than me. There are so many people in the world that think that the Jews do not stay in Palestine, in Israel. So that's one of the dangers of this idea.
Absolutely. So 4 years after the Yom Kippur War, Sadat was in the Knesset. 2 years later, there was a peace treaty between these two countries. You spoke about how fast things change. Israelis are still in trauma. It's not even PTSD. They're still in trauma. Obviously, the Palestinians are in trauma. But do you have some hope that if better leadership was there, that wasn't as extreme and that was more supportive, do you have hope that Israelis will be able to overcome this and see a different future?
Interesting, you spoke about Sadat. My first political memory, I was born, as I said before, 1 week before the Yom Kippur War. So I was 4 years old when Sadat arrived. And I remember that in the kindergarten, we were preparing things about peace, like welcoming Sadat. This is really my first political memory when I was 4 or 5 years old. And I think that behind the personal story, what happened in the Israeli public opinion at that time, it's a very important example about the option of positive, fast changes. Before the war in 73, there was a big majority in Israel against giving back Sinai. The statement was, yes, we prefer Sharm el-Sheikh. Sharm el-Sheikh is the city in Sinai, okay? We prefer Sharm el-Sheikh on peace. And of course, after the war, 3,000, almost 3,000 soldiers were killed in October 73. 3,000. It's more casualties than this October 7th. It's true that it was war, and it wasn't like babies in their beds. The October 7th is a much bigger trauma because the citizens were killed and because the hostages, but 3,000 soldiers were killed. And 4 years later, when this process happened, there was almost a consensus in Israel supporting Menachem Begin. Menachem Begin enjoyed support even from his party, from the Likud party. And I think it proves that when there are like strong and brave leaders, there was also the symbolic act of Sadat. I mean, some of you remember, I don't remember, I was 4 years old, okay? When he came to the Knesset, okay?
Yeah.
Do you remember it?
Yeah.
I heard from the generation of my parents, people were like, wow. So it was very symbolic art. So maybe, if the leader of Saudi Arabia, I mean, if there will be a normal government in Israel, if the leader of Saudi Arabia, and there will be a normal president in the USA, and they come to Israel, and they like having this statement, and maybe if there is a leader in Israel that is brave enough, public opinion can be changed. Even after such a traumatic event, October 73 was no doubt. Until October 7th, it was the traumatic event of Israel. I mean, sure.
So another question. By the way, these aren't my questions. These are Beital's questions. I'm just shaking them a little bit. But I agree with all of them. So another question is about the classic statement, there's no left in Israel. We know, we know from the last election that perhaps if Meretz and Labor had joined together, but there actually could have been a different outcome, 30,000 votes separated. The Arab parties had joined together, things could all be very different. But, things could be different if Donald Trump wasn't elected too. But what's your sense of the left, of Yair Galon, of, the classic message was, oh, those guys favor peace and we favor security, so, forget about the left. What's your sense?
Okay, so maybe I'll begin with just to share with you the numbers. In our research, we ask people about their own ideological inclination, by their own subjective, what they feel about it, how they define themselves, the right, center, and left. And among the Jewish in Israel, we found that something like 60% define themselves as right wing, 25% as center, and 15% as left. So 15, it's really very small numbers. And of course, in the past, it was much, much more. In 92, when Rabin won the election, Labour got 44 seats, and Meretz got 12 seats. There were 56 in the Israeli parliament out of 120 of the left. Okay? And now we speak about 15%. Okay? 15%, the 5% the left, and indeed, the concept of being leftist, and if I would say the brand of left, not only weakened significantly, became almost poison. Unfortunately, in the age of my kids are in high school, one of the ways to kill someone is to tell him you're leftist. And it wasn't, of course, it wasn't in the past. Now, I will not get now to discussion, what is the problem of the left, because we have to be here till midnight if we want to discuss it. This is like the biggest discussion in the left of Israel. I think that there are many mistakes that have been done by the left leadership, and also Netanyahu a 30-year incitement campaign against the left. Okay, this campaign was successful, but I think that I know, and I want to share with you, the change that we now see in the political identification of people in Israel is the new concept of the liberal democratic camp. 4 years ago, it was very weird. No one in Israel thought about itself as a liberal democratic. And the change began in January 2023, following the declaration of the government of the judicial overhaul, and mainly following the huge protest movement that was in 2023. Now, the protest movement was to protect liberal and democratic values. I remember when I was running the demonstration, I was, I was involved, and also aChord, the organization that I lead, we've been working with the leader of the struggle. But in one of the missions, I let myself to go out. It was in Jerusalem, in the middle of the working days. There were like 100,000 protesters, and the issue was the change of the judge election committee, which is look like something very, 3 years ago, no one in Israel knows what is the composition of the judges election committee. And now really kids know, not like babies, okay? But kids at high school know about the judge election committee. So people went to the street, and pilots refused to continue serving the army because of this. So then the liberal democratic, so it was women rights, all those things, it was gay rights and all those things. So the liberal democratic camp identity became stronger. And now we see that 60% of Israelis, and also interestingly 60% of Jewish Israelis, define themselves as liberal democratic, which means that it is deep include to the right wing. Those are Bennett voters. You should remember that Bennett is back on stage. I mean, if you want, you can speak about Bennett. I'm not going to have a lot of good things to say about him. But even his voters, Bennett, that was the prime minister, is now probably running again. He's right wing. Many of his voters are right wing, but then they define themselves as liberal democratic. So this camp now enjoys a majority in Israel, and this is the biggest chance of winning the next election. There is no way that the left will win the next election, and even the left center is not enough. We need the liberal democratic camp, and we need partnership with the Arab countries. I'm sorry, with the Arab citizens, inside Israel. And I just want to say again what I said below before, that in all 5 topics that now are in the main agenda in Israel, which is ending the war, bringing back all the hostages in exchange of ending the war, national investigation committee, draft the Haredim to the Israeli army, and of course being against the judicial overhaul. In all those 5 things, the 60% that represent the liberal democratic camp are against the government, and this is against the government. The government represents a minority. Now, I think that the biggest challenge of us in Israel that are part try to affect the liberal democratic camp, that the liberal democratic identity will include also the aspect related to the Israeli-Palestinian conflict, which is now not the case. And you heard it below. Yeah. I mean, what we saw in Jerusalem in the recent days, actually, you follow the news, okay?
Yeah.
People are getting in the streets at night. When I spoke in Montreal, it was like 7 p.m. In Montreal, it was like 1 a.m. in Israel. There were like 10,000 people in front of the Prime Minister's office. So why they was there? Because they were against the firing of the head of the Shin Bet. Because they understand democracy, when you fire the head of the Shin Bet, it can be the end of democracy. The head of the Shin Bet. So they fought for democratic values. Okay? They wouldn't go 10,000 people in the middle of night to demonstrate for a regional agreement to bring peace. Okay? And our goal, the liberal democratic camp, the liberal democratic identity will include also the desire to reach to this agreement that will end the war. By the way, in the past, let's back to 92, when Rabin was elected, Rabin wasn't such a big Democrat. Rabin was elected because he promised to have agreement with the Palestinians. Israeli politics in the past was only about the conflict. Now the conflict is on stage, and we need the liberal democratic camp to include it in his identity.
Yeah, I mean, while the Biden administration was in power, the two-state solution was back. It was back amongst all our governments, and it was being revived as an idea. Unfortunately, we've stepped back. So I just want to ask, a question. There's no question that Israelis are on the streets to protect their democracy. You just explained why. That 60% covers a wide range. But of course, we've also heard, and I really have the sense that all of the protests about the war are, let's say, 90% about the hostages and maybe 10% about the Palestinians.
Even 95.5%.
Even 95.5. So I guess, if and when the hostages are all back, or whatever, I just wonder what's going to happen then vis-a-vis the war. Are we going to see, in your view, a massive restart of the war in an effort to try and destroy Hamas? What's next?
Well, it's difficult to, first, I really hope that we will reach this point. Let's hope, because we must have the hostages back on. It's difficult, to forecast what will be in the future. I can describe what dynamics I see now in the Israeli problem. And what we see in our studies is there is a clear majority that support a deal in which Israel will get all the hostages and will end the war. For many Israelis, end the war is a prize, but there are also many Israelis that for them, ending the war is not a prize, it's something that serves Israeli interests. And 80% of Israelis think that bringing back all the hostages is more important than bitut Hamas, like collapsing of the Hamas. Okay, and a big majority of Israelis think that ending the war in agreement include bringing all the hostages, serve the interest of Israel. And the demonstration that we see now in the street, there is a big energy related to the democratic things, but even a bigger energy related to bring the hostages back. Okay? I do have to say that there is, if I try to estimate what happened if there will be an hostages deal. So first, it depends, what will be the deal and what will be the guarantees that Hamas will get that Israel will not conduct the war, which I'm not expert on that. Okay, but there is one thing that we see in the Israeli public. The Israeli public, he wants to crush Hamas, but he doesn't trust the government. With the exception of the 20-30% of the extreme right wing, that they just want, they vote for the government, they believe in the government, and they want the government to keep on the war, and they also declare very publicly. For them, the goal is to control Gaza and to build settlements in Gaza. I'm not telling you like conspiracy. This is like the official statement of Otzma Yehudit, the religious Zionist party, and some ministers in the aChord. There was a conference in Minyane Umar in Jerusalem. 9 government ministers came to a big conference that said the goal of the war is building settlement in Gaza. Think about the parents in Israel that send their kids to fight in Gaza. So Netanyahu say they are going to save the hostages, but 9 ministers from his government say that the goal is to build settlement in Gaza. And when the Israeli public see, that Netanyahu, he created a dynamic that the chief of staff resigned. Now he fired the head of the Shin Bet, and there is something that in Israel we couldn't believe that we see the first time, like in November, that the prime minister office is released statement against the chief of staff in the middle of the war. I mean, in the past, we couldn't even imagine it, and it happened. So, what I think related to your question, that since people really lost trust in the current government, Many people say, no, we have to have a normal government in order to finish with the Hamas. Okay, but with this government, there is no way. And I hope the positive dynamic that can be created, of course, a deal that return all the hostages, and the most important thing, that build an alternative in Gaza. You know, the main complaint of the commander of the IDF is that the government never defined for them what is the end goal of the war in Gaza. Like insane that there is a war, and the government doesn't define the army what's the end goal. And when there is a new government, it will build an alternative in Gaza, hopefully with the Arab states, and that might be the direction to get us for 5 years.
Okay. How much, Nora, do you have a question?
Oh, yeah, only when you're finished.
Yeah, I'm good, but let's take questions.
Yeah.
Your questions are.
Just talk loud.
Yeah, well, go ahead, use that.
This is wonderful, and actually, in spite of saying you couldn't be optimistic, you actually gave many of us a feeling of hope, just knowing that the liberal democratic body is alive and well in the majority. So much of it depends, the power of this group to transform and save Israel depends on the capacity to vote in a new election, which is something obviously Bibi is going to do everything in his power to permit. So since that is the main impediment to a way forward, I'm wondering what thoughts you have. I don't know how you trigger an election. I don't know, do you have any comments on that?
By the way, Nora was the founder of JSpace and the founder of New Israel. Wow.
Canada.
It's not a very important organization.
Thank you.
You know, I'm trying to answer because, you know, until like a few months ago, we could try to estimate, you know, what Netanyahu want to do. I mean, if you would ask me 2 years ago if Netanyahu would try to abolish the election, I would say no way. I mean, I don't like him, but you know, it's democracy, okay? But it proved that he is ready to break all the lines. Now, the number goal of Netanyahu and the right wing in Israel related to the election is to limit the right of votes of the Arab citizens. This is the number one political project, because this will ensure that they will stay in power forever. If the 20% of the Israeli citizens cannot vote or cannot, that the representative in the Knesset will be our part of the coalition, again, this is the safety zone of the right wing in Israel. And they are working very hard on that. And they began a few weeks ago changing the laws in Israel, that a party that doesn't support Israel as a Jewish and democratic state, by the way, it's already in the law, maybe I should say a background. In all the recent elections in the last 20 years, the Knesset Electoral Committee is composed from the parties in the Knesset. And in Israel, there is a law that allows the Knesset to forbid a party from running to the election, which is a good law. It was created following Kahana and following the lesson from the Nazi things in Germany. I mean, I'm very much for it. I think this is like what we call protected democracy. Okay? Protected democracy. Okay, the majority can say, if you're racist, you cannot run for the parliament. And in all the elections in the last 20 years, the committee of the Knesset decided that at least one Arab party cannot run for the election, but in all those cases, with not even a single election, the aChord overruled this decision, and the Arab parties were allowed to run for the Knesset in all the occasions. Okay, and now they are trying to change the law and to make it much harsh for the aChord to overrule this decision. And we are in one of the cases, the overruling was 7 versus 5. We were very, and then 7 versus 6. I'm sorry, but it has to be odd, of course. We were very close that the aChord will not overrule the decision. So now they are trying to change the law so that a regular interpretation of the law will not allow the aChord to overrule the decision. And if that happens, it means in the next election, some of the Arab parties will not be able to run to the Knesset, and that's minimize significantly the chance of the democratic liberal country. This is their goal, and they work on it, and it's already in the legislation process. It isn't the legislation is saying that if one of the members of the party declared even once that he is not for a Jewish democratic, not for a Jewish state, and most Arab Palestinians in Israel, they don't support a Jewish state, okay? And I think it's fair enough, I'm Zionist, I support a Jewish state. Also Shaira, my friend, she's a very good citizen, but she's not for a Jewish state, okay? And so this is the dangerous direction. And the government is rushing.
I think this right here.
Thank you for being here, and it's been very informative. I was trying to do the forums. Very informative, hearing a lot about, is this better?
You can hold it.
Okay, you're right.
They also record, so it's important to use the.
I didn't want to get yelled at.
Yeah.
So I've been to a JSpace event. I came with an open mind. And the panel downstairs was also very informative. What I would like to better understand, and maybe you can provide some commentary on, is the absence of discussion of extremism on the other side and terrorism. Because one of the narratives that I often am hearing is, and this goes in line with why people might think that all Palestinians are terrorists, is that we don't necessarily see them advocating for a two-state solution. We hear a lot about them wanting liberation and wanting to take over all of Israel. So can you provide some commentary on how you see your views on two-state solution with that context?
Yes. So, even in the most optimistic perspective, we have a very, very, very serious problem on both sides, and for sure also in the Palestinian side. I mean, the fact that the Hamas grew in the Palestinian society, and the fact that we know there was not insignificant support for October 7th, and we know the curriculum in high schools in Gaza, and unfortunately also in Palestinian Authority, is a very, I would say, negative curriculum. Okay, and things even are much worse now. I mean, think about the devastation, destruction of Gaza. Okay, the huge number of deaths total. Of course, it increased aid towards Israelis. I mean, no doubt, we are in the worst time of the Israeli-Palestinian conflict. The worst time, and I mean, I hope that we are in the worst time, because things can be worse in the coming weeks. Okay? I mean, if someone will ask me, not on October 6th, if someone will ask me on October 8th, if Israel would kill 40,000 Palestinians, I would say never. We will not let them kill 10,000 kids. 10,000 kids killed, and of course it creates very bad dynamics in the Palestinian society. At the same time, we know that positive dynamics can change what happened among nations. There are all the problems in the Palestinian side, but we also know that the Israeli government strengthened the extremist Palestinian and weakened the moderate Palestinian. It's like unbelievable, but this is the situation. Israel strengthened Hamas. Smotrich, he was interviewed in the Israeli TV a few years ago, and he said explicitly, our strategy is to strengthen Hamas in order to avoid the Palestinian state. And the Qatar money. So and at the same time, Israel weakened significantly the Palestinian Authority, which is far from being perfect. Far, but they are a moderate Palestinian.
And I mean, look, the answer is, frankly, there's a lot of stuff out there on social media that says all Palestinians want to do away with Israel. It just ain't true. In fact, the most recent polling done by Dalia Shanva and by Khalidi show that there's a larger number of Palestinians right now that are supporting two states than Israelis. Now, you could say, well, they're doing that because they just got wiped out of Gaza. That's not why. That's not why. The idea that the recent polling now shows that 6% of Gazans support Hamas. When I talked about the previous polling, when Gazans were asked who they claim responsible for their fate, this was pre-October 7th, they said the Israelis, the Egyptians, and Hamas. Okay? They are under threat from Hamas. The same Hamas that threw the PA out of Gaza, the same Hamas that was willing to shoot their own people if they dared to make peace with Israelis or deal with Israelis. There are many Palestinians in the West Bank that want to make peace. They want to live in a secure place. They want their children to grow up. They don't want really and truly, other than an ideological crazy Hamasnik who's prepared to do what they did on October 7th, who thinks that they're going to throw the Israelis out realistically? The seventh largest army in the world with nuclear weapons, a Jewish state is there and is not going anywhere. Does anybody really think it's going to have Palestine from the river to the sea? I mean, it's still I just think that there is the social media out there which basically characterizes Palestinians as wanting to wipe out the Israelis, which you hear it here more than you hear it in Israel. But that's my take.
Can I just ask a follow-up?
Sure.
In the sense of the pro-peace movement that we're even seeing here today, does it exist on the Palestinian side in the diaspora? I don't know. I tried to find it and I couldn't. And I wonder if you could speak a little bit to that.
I mean, I shouldn't take this over, but the Palestinian community in North America is anti-normalization. Okay, they're holier than the Pope. They live here. Their lives are great. Their families are dying in Gaza, or they're occupied in the West Bank, and the last thing they want to do is talk about peace or talk about working with my organization, which helps Palestinians in the health sector. They won't support us because they think they'll be seen as traitors if they support a Jewish or Israeli or Jewish Palestinian. So I don't expect them to be out there protesting for peace. It's just not in there. They're being occupied. But if you ask whether they would prefer two states or whether they think that there's going to be a one-state solution in the next 50, 60, 70 years, they're not crazy.
I encourage you to go to YouTube and see the Welcome to Arafat in Gaza. I believe it was in 94. In July 1994, Arafat came to Gaza. And like hundreds of thousands of people were waiting for him after he signed agreement with Rabin, okay? With the biggest enemy of the Palestinian people, okay? And the same people that 30 years later salute the Hamas for October 7th, they've been waiting in the street like crazy to support Arafat that signed the deal with with Israel, with Rabin. Okay, and Rabin for them is a war criminal, not like for us. For us, it's a peace. For them, he was responsible for 48 and the Nakba. It means that in the Palestinian people, like any other people, there are the option to support war, and there is the option to support peace. It's dependent by the condition. It depends also, not only, but also by the condition that we create.
The leadership. The leadership is so important.
Thank you. So I wanted to follow up on that theme about leadership and trust in government, because we've been talking here about civil society and political institutions. And we all know that it's very hard to talk about changing the people who lead political institutions when we don't have a level of social trust in the general population. So I want to look at your views about, I'm looking at the Jewish population of the state of Israel, and the question about trust in government, people's willingness to believe that the institutions can still be fixed, their willingness to vote in elections, and the ability of institutions to recover from what is now, this path towards highly illiberal democracy, autocracy, and, particularly as we have newer generations leaving the country, the more moderate, well, again, talked about immigration and the impact of immigration of Jewish moderates and the impact that that can have on the ability to see a better future. Thank you.
So indeed, the point that you raise relate to another big challenge we have in the Israeli society. This is the significantly decreased trust in the institution. Now, one of the attributes of populist leadership is to have an attack against the institution in the country. If there is something with an attribute of a populist leader, is that he's saying, I represent the people of the country, and I'm the only one to represent the people of the country, and all the institutions are against them, the academia, the art, of course, the media, the court, the parliament, with the exception of my party, all of them are against the nation, and that's what Trump said. That's what Bolsonaro said in Brazil. That's what said in Hungary, Hungary, and that's what Netanyahu said. Netanyahu said at the end of the Shivet, 4 hours before October 7th, he knew about the attack. Now Netanyahu is the prime minister. My son is 18 years old. He's free to live. If the prime minister said. So it's really, and then you hear things like, all the members of Knesset should go home after October 7th. Like Gilad Karib is responsible for the lack of security, like those right-wing ministers that funded Hamas. And this is the goal of the populist regime. And unfortunately, we see the damage not only in the right wing in Israel, but all over the Israeli society. And the only way to get out is to get a normal government. And by the way, in the previous government, which was far from being perfect government, the change government of Naftali Bennett and Yair Lapid, you saw there was a beginning of increase of trust in the government. It was clear that the prime minister were working for the citizen, and the different ministers were working for the citizen. And then we saw in the research, slowly, the trust came again. That's the only way to get out. There will be a government that is really working for the citizen. And that's why there is no way to save Israel without changing the government. And then it will take decades to bring back the trust that we should begin.
How sad that comment that a government should be working for its citizens. How sad is that?
I agree.
I actually wanted to bring back to something that you said, John, about the response here in Canada, the support that was 51%. It hasn't been brought up here, but I think the problem here in North America or in Canada, and where we are, is that the whole issue of what's happening in Israel is tied in with anti-Semitism here. And so that I'm caught because I support a lot of what's being said here. And yet if I try to support Israel, I could be labeled as criticize Israel, is that right? I could be labeled as anti-Semitic, anti-Zionist. And I just wanted to bring that up. I know that may be a bit of a departure from what's being discussed here. But I was at my synagogue this morning. We were having this discussion. And it was a big issue. Oh, we got to support Israel, come what may. And yet, at the same time, how do you deal with it when you're saying, I've got friends who are not Jewish and are very criticizing what's happening in Gaza. I'm not sure just how I have to word that. It's really a conflict.
It's a huge conflict that we're all facing.
Yes.
And this goes to that question, which is here, conservative Jews and un-Jews see Israel as the insurance policy and as the protector against anti-Semitism. And we have been told by the establishment, criticize Israel, you're going to increase anti-Semitism, therefore shut up. Don't criticize Israel. And we've also been told that anti-Semitism is everywhere. We're on the verge of 1938, and all of a sudden, all these anti-Semites that were underground for all this time decided after October 7th to come out. And as if there was widespread anti-Semitism around Canada, and it took October 7th to bring them out, as opposed to, hello, this isn't anti-Semitism. It's called anti-government of Israel, anti-war, and anti-death. It's not that. A lot of people disagree with me, including my wife, but that's my take. Joan, a former president of New Israel of Canada.
So I don't know how to articulate this exactly, but when I'm in Israel or when I'm here listening to you all outstanding representatives of the best of Israel, I am aware of the gap. Partly for that, I don't agree with Jon, I'm with Clara, but I agree that we are in a tricky spot because of anti-Semitism. But more so, the part that is hurting me and that I can't figure out how to address is that Israelis are in a different place from us. You're giving us fantastic data, and I appreciate it so much. But at the very same time, the people who I love and see in Israel aren't the people they were before the war. They are right in the middle of that trauma. We, however much we love them, don't really understand now how they feel. And I feel like as the hostages are released, they are seeing more clearly the danger they were in on October the 7th. And they are still feeling that sense of danger. And I actually think that some number feel the country could have been overrun. I mean, I think the sense of loss of security is profound, is the common way to say that. So I'm not quite sure how we who love the best of Israel can speak to Israelis in ways that are supportive and that give room for us on the left or center left to be heard, because they're blocked on so many issues that we see as key. Do you have any suggestions?
Yeah, I'd like to address it. First, John, you are very correct. Israel is generally they're in the middle of the trauma or beginning the post-trauma. But this is the situation now in Israel. I totally agree. And I shared with you before. The majority of Israelis, they hate Palestinians. They still think that, everything to get straight, we see only also in our data. And what I said before, it's not a contradiction to what you said. I said there is also a pragmatism. I can't agree more with John. Supporting Israel now is being against the government of Israel. They had, I think, tomorrow, the conference in Jerusalem, the ministers chiefly called, and today the organization of the Jews in Europe saying that this is the biggest support for anti-Semitism because he invited senior people that are anti-Semitic to conference in Israel. It's insane. So what we need for the Jews in the diaspora is to help us to put the red line. I want to say something sensitive. What is more, I know that, and I'm not in your position, and I know that it is hard to go in the street and to see demonstration that say that Israel is doing genocide. But what I want to ask you, what is more dangerous for Israel? This young student in Toronto University that said that Israel commit genocide, or the fact that the deputy speaker in the Knesset is calling to commit genocide? What is more dangerous for Israel? For God's sake, for God's sake. So, and I'm telling you, today we're even crazy. I understand, and I have a cousin that went in the university, and I know it's our time, okay, to be a Jewish in an elite university in the state. But what is in danger Israel is not these Palestinian Protestant universities, is the voices inside the Israeli government. I heard that the Jewish Federation of Toronto didn't have any statement against Ben-Gvir.
Yeah.
What's going on? What's going on?
That's the Jewish Federation
That's the
Never
base
mind,
Jewish
never mind.
community.
That one, you know, I mean,
And you know, it does, I mean, UJ in New York issued a statement. When there is a persona non grata, also Smotrich, you cannot step in UJ in New York, so what's going on? So if, I didn't come here to complain, really. And for sure, I so much appreciate your support, and I know that you here are trying to do everything. But we need the pressure from outside because the government is getting out of control.
But that's why JSpace and the Israel Fund of Canada and all these organizations are so crucial, because
Exactly.
our mainstream Jewish community is so
Right.
on the right and so oblivious and really thinking that
That's why the vote.
And more so, just to understand, more so than the U.S. We're much more to the right than they are in the U.S. by large.
but what Jon has to say is true.
No,
as
I'm
well.
not negating
It's
any.
also-
Absolutely.
It's also part of the
It's part of
reality. These are not people, they are afraid of criticizing Israel, either because they think it's going to cause anti-Semitism, or just because the world is against Israel.
I was actually making a different point. I made it poorly. The point I was trying to make was there is a gap between us and Israel right now. Forget the other stuff. And everything that was a beautiful point. But it's hard for us who come from where we come from to make ourselves feel one with so many Israelis who don't, because they're in trauma, and we come and we say, you need to think about shared society, you need to support the other in Israel. All the things we say, they say, you don't understand, and they're not moving forward. And your data is so inspiring, but doesn't seem to represent what happens on the street or in the kibbutz or in the shopping
But I guess,
center. When in my shopping center.
what I would say is this isn't the time to ask Israelis how they're feeling.
Right.
This isn't the time to ask Palestinians how they're feeling. You can't ask them whether they support peace. 11 months after October 7th, or 15 months after October 7th, they're not capable. But we should be capable of holding in our hearts both the deaths of Palestinians and the horrible massacre of October 7th. Oh, I think this is the last question. Last question.
So, thank you. From what I gathered from your initial comments downstairs, that after October 7th, your organization was very successful in preventing a lot of conflict between the Palestinian population and the Jewish population.
Serious way.
How did you do that? What did you actually do, and why was there not any conflict?
Okay, I was trying to do it.
Go ahead.
Okay,
2 minutes.
okay. So I'll tell you what helped us. What helped us is that there was a very clear interest of many people in the Israeli society, include right-wing mayors and business owners, to avoid violence between Jewish and Arabs. Think about there was one of the management of a big chain, okay? He was asked in the TV show, there was a strike of the Arab citizens, and he was asked, what does he think? He said, I'm very angry about my Arab employees. So they asked him, are you going to fire them? And he's a right wing. He said, who is going to work for me if I'm going to fire the Arab? Who is going to run the shops? Okay, he is the Shasnik, religious, Mizrahi, right wing. So there was, and you know, think about the manager of the hospital. You know, the injuries came from hospitals all over Israel. 20-30% of the medical staff in Israel are Arab citizens. So the manager of the hospital, when they thought there would be clashes between the medical staff, Jewish and Arab, oh my God! I mean, Israel would really the civil. You know, I went on Shabbat, October 14th, to visit my brother-in-law. He was drafted to Miluim. So we went to visit him. You know, the war didn't begin, it was just the Air Force. There were like thousands of soldiers waiting to get into Gaza. And there were like 50 buses there to take, when the war began, to take the soldiers. Who were the bus riders? They were all Arabs. It was like amazing. It was like amazing. You know, Israel cannot function. Okay? I mean, because of the positive processes that Arab citizens, I can speak on hours on that, so I'll stop in a 2 minutes. There was positive processes that Arabs became more and more, not enough, but more and more integrated in the economy of Israel. COVID and other processes, that, by the way, even the Israeli government pushed strongly the integration, even at Netanyahu himself, when the time that he was saying, pushed the integration of Arabs into the academia and employment market.
So that's in contrast to 2021, you mean?
Yes, yes. And okay, I don't have time, so I just say that what we did is we gave the leadership those shared spaces, can be, businesses, academia, mixed cities, a very concrete recommendation of steps that can be done and messages that can be done to alleviate tension. And there were many organizations on the ground. And I do want to say again, the New Israel Fund was the main funder of those organizations, and even right-wing mayors. They had interest that their city will not be synonym with civil war, okay? And they also issued a statement to alleviate the tension. And thanks God, it succeeded.
How does it look?
So the closing remarks are starting, so everybody can go downstairs. Thank you.